Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. Yet another episode of Crushing Fantasy Football. I am Bryce Logridge, your host of the show. All right, guys, today we are going to be talking about players that have massively high ceilings and could potentially help you win a league, but also come with a whole lot of risk. So, we're going to be weighing the risk versus reward with these players. And this is incredibly important because, you need to know whether to draft or fade these guys. So I'm going to be going over the pros and cons of every player and talking to you about whether or not we should actually draft them and whether or not the risk outweighs the reward. So I'm going to start right here with the very first player on my list, and that is T. Higgins. Now, T. Higgins is a guy who, you look at his athletic intangibles, he's 6'4". He has the ability to dominate within the red zone because of his size and contested catch abilities. He plays on a great offense. He's a receiver who had all kinds of promise coming into the league. And, he's a unique talent. I'll say that. His contested catch abilities and his abilities to dominate over the middle of the field are incredibly impressive. He obviously has one of the best young quarterbacks in the league in Joe Burrow throwing him the ball. But my problem is this dude's never seen more than a 24% team target share since coming into the league. Obviously, last year he had some injury problems, although he played all 17 games. A lot of those games he came out and was injured and had to come out of the game pretty much immediately. So he didn't really play a true full 17 games last year. But the target share last year was only 19%. The target share the year before that was like 23.6%. This dude has never really commanded true target volume. And a large reason for this is because there's just so many elite pass catchers in this offense. You've got Tyler Boyd along with Jamar Chase. Joe Mixon started to see more targets out of the backfield last year. There's just so many other mouths to feed in this offense. They drafted Charlie Jones. They are going to have to throw the ball to a lot of different receivers. So is the target share going to go up this season above 24%? I highly doubt it. And I just don't want to take a wide receiver in the first few rounds that's not going to see more than a 25% team target share, even if there are going to be some high-value touches mixed in being in a good offense. Fact of the matter is, Jamar Chase dominates the target share for this team. There's too many mouths to feed. And when it comes to the wide receiver core, the only one you could really trust is Jamar Chase. So although T. Higgins has a high ceiling with the combination of his talent, his size, the offense that he plays in, I think that we should go ahead and avoid him because I think that he's just too risky, and he really hasn't shown to have an awesome fantasy points per game ceiling since coming into the league. So as far as drafting him in the second and third round where he's going in drafts, I would avoid him most of the time. If you're drafting on underdog, maybe take a few shares of him just because, the week 17 correlation, they play the Chiefs. But overall, I'm avoiding T. Higgins. Next player on my list is going to be DeAndre Hopkins. Now, this is a guy who, you look at 2022, right? 7 out of his 9 games that he played last year, he had double-digit targets. This was an incredibly good sign because if you look at the season before, 2021, he was not a target hog. The Arizona offense was really good to start the season, and they were spreading the ball around and throwing the ball to everybody. I don't know why they decided to go with that approach in 2021 and then go back to featuring DeAndre Hopkins as a target hog in 2022, but that's very much what they did. 7 out of his 9 games last year that he played, he was being force-fed the ball, saw double-digit targets in 7 out of 9 games. So it's good to see that DeAndre Hopkins can still command elite target volume. And I don't think that Treylon Burks is going to cut into his target volume at all in Tennessee. I think that DeAndre Hopkins is going to be by far and away the main target hog in this offense. And you look at Derrick Henry, right? He is the best offensive weapon that DeAndre Hopkins has ever played besides, right? So, you look at his years in Houston, he was the entire offense outside of his quarterback. You look at his years in Arizona, he was essentially the entire offense outside of his quarterback. And now he has another star player in his offense to help take some defensive attention off him, right? So I think that DeAndre Hopkins and Derrick Henry are going to help each other, right? They're going to both help the offense. They're going to both help each other's overall efficiency because Derrick Henry is going to see less stacked boxes with teams worried about DeAndre Hopkins. And DeAndre Hopkins can't have all the defensive attention on him when you have Derrick Henry in the backfield. So I think that this offense actually has some sneaky upside. I think that they can outperform expectations. Granted, the offensive line is bad. They don't have an elite quarterback. But with Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins in the same offense, I think that they could have some sneaky upside and at least outperform expectations, thus giving DeAndre Hopkins some decent touchdown upside along with what's probably going to be elite target volume. So I would say he's risky because he's in what's projected to be one of the worst offenses in the NFL. But I definitely think that he's worth it where he's going. You could get him in round 4 right now. It's DeAndre Hopkins. He's one of the most talented wide receivers in the league. And I think he's going to be a target hog this year once again. Next player on my list is going to be Najee Harris. Now, Najee Harris, he obviously has a very high ceiling because, he's going to get force-fed volume. This dude has had 579 rushing attempts in his first 2 years in the league, averaging almost 300 rushing attempts per game in his first 2 years in the NFL. But you look at the efficiency, 2021, 3.9 yards per carry, 2022, 3.8 yards per carry. So the yards per carry efficiency for Najee Harris has been terrible in his career. So, yes, he has a ton of volume as far as a rushing game, but if you look what happened, the minute that Big Ben was no longer the quarterback for the team, and we brought in younger quarterbacks with stronger arms, Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett, they were throwing a lot less checkdowns to Najee Harris out of the backfield. So, he went from having 70-plus targets in his first year in the NFL to only a little over 40 targets last year. So his target share was literally cut in half, and he saw less rushing. So, I just don't think that he's going to get the combination of the rushing volume and the target volume that you need to make up for the fact that he's not efficient. Because if you look at his 579 rushing attempts since coming into the league, his biggest play is a 37-yard run. That's absolutely pathetic. 579 rushing attempts, and his longest play is a 37-yard run. His backup, the guy running behind him, Jaylen Warren, is a more explosive back. He's obviously quite a bit smaller. Najee's got more of the bell cow build, but Jaylen Warren has all the big playability as far as the backs in this backfield. He's going to start cutting into Najee Harris's workload this year. I'm telling you, the coaching staff would be stupid to not let Jaylen Warren get a significantly increased workload as efficient as he was last year. So I think that Jaylen Warren's going to cut into his opportunity share a little bit more this year than he did last year. And at the end of the day, Najee Harris, he doesn't have high-end speed. He doesn't have high-end big playability. So while he has a high ceiling due to the potentially huge workload, I just don't think he's worth the risk going off the board in the third round. I don't like running backs that don't have big playability, and he might not even have good touchdown upside because we don't know that this offense is necessarily going to be any good. So I'm avoiding Najee Harris. Next player on my list is going to be Kadarius Tony. Now, this is a guy where if you looked up huge ceiling, high risk in the dictionary, the fantasy football dictionary, they would have a picture of Kadarius Tony because this is a guy who cannot stay on the field, right? 2021, he only played 10 games. 2022, last year, he only played 9 games. He's been on and off the field his entire career, and reports are that he just tweaked his knee in practice. I saw this report this morning that Kadarius Tony tweaked his knee in practice. It was either yesterday or today, and I'm just like, goodness, here we go. More Kadarius Tony injury. So it's incredibly hard to trust this guy to stay on the field. We know that he, is a little bit of a head case as well. So, you worry about disciplinary issues. Like, is he going to cause problems and start throwing punches at people again like he did in that game against the Cowboys where he had 189 receiving yards? I don't know. It very much could be the case. But what you have with Kadarius Tony is you have elite talent, right? We watched him in the Super Bowl last year on that punt return. We've seen him, bust out big plays with minimal target share and produce elite fantasy numbers with minimal target share. He just needs to get his target share up. He needs to get on the field more consistently. Are the Chiefs going to spread the ball around and throw it to everybody, or are they going to feed Kadarius Tony a lot more? In the sample that we had with Kadarius Tony on the Chiefs last year, they were throwing him the ball quite a bit. So I think that he actually has the opportunity to be by far and away the most targeted wide receiver in this offense if he actually stays on the field. And that, combined with his talent, means that he has seriously high upside. So what I would recommend with Kadarius Tony is in best ball formats, go ahead and take a healthy amount of him because he gives you tremendous upside, and you don't have to draft him until the middle rounds, and he's a great stack to go along with Patrick Mahomes. And your everyday redraft leagues, well, I would proceed with caution, right? And I would base everything off ADP. If you're in a league where he's going late and you can get him around 9 or 10, you're smashing that every time. If you're in a league where people are reaching for him around round 5, you probably want to avoid him because he's just too risky. So he's better for best ball, in my personal opinion, because it's going to be really hard to figure out which weeks to play him, which weeks to sit him. Is he actually going to be on the field or not? I think he's better for best ball than everyday redraft. But in your everyday redraft leagues, I would certainly draft him for the ceiling if he slips to the later rounds. Next player on my list is going to be Jamir Gibbs. Now, I think that a lot of people are worried about, he's small, right? David Montgomery, the bigger back, he's going to siphon all his rushing touchdowns. I think this is true. I think that David Montgomery is going to siphon a lot of Jamir Gibbs' rushing touchdowns, much like Jamal Williams did to DeAndre Swift last year. And it's going to be very annoying for Jamir Gibbs owners. But here's what we have to look at with Jamir Gibbs. This dude is a hybrid running back wide receiver, right? You look at his 2021 season in college, 35 receptions, 465 receiving yards. 2022, 44 receptions, 444 receiving yards. And so, this is a guy who can run efficiently. He can dominate in the passing game. And he's going to be being moved all around the field. I mean, we've got a team who is moving Jamir Gibbs all around the field. I mean, all the reports coming out of team practices are that Jamir Gibbs is pretty much constantly set in motion. He's lining up in the backfield. He's lining up out of the slot. He's lining up out wide, running all the way back into the backfield to act like he's running and then, take a pitch. Look, this is a guy who is going to be moving all over the field. He has tremendous talent and big playability, as we know. So I think that even though David Montgomery is going to be siphoning some of his rushing touchdowns, I think that, one, this team is going to have so many scoring opportunities that even if David Montgomery is taking away touchdowns from Jamir Gibbs, there's going to be so many touchdowns to go around in this offense that Jamir Gibbs can still get in the end zone a lot. And I wouldn't be surprised if he scored 12 or 13 touchdowns this year, even with David Montgomery taking touchdowns away from him, because this offense is going to be so good. And then obviously for PPR formats, he's going to be an absolute target hog, and he's going to be targeted more than almost any other wide receiver in this offense outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I love Jamir Gibbs. Even though David Montgomery is going to siphon some of his production as far as touchdowns, I still think he's going to put up awesome fantasy numbers, and I think he's going to be a top 10 running back in fantasy this year. Where he's going in the draft right now, he's certainly a good pick. Next and final player on my list is going to be Aaron Jones. Now, Aaron Jones is, he's a guy that he's really polarizing for fantasy, right? Because you look at his yards per carry efficiency over the course of his career, 5.1 yards per carry in his career. This guy is the second most efficient running back on a 500-plus carry sample size, tied with Tony Pollard with 5.1 yards per carry, and behind only Nick Chubb, who has 5.2 yards per carry on 500-plus carries in his career. So, Aaron Jones, on a pretty large sample size, has been incredibly efficient. He's one of the most efficient backs in the league. He's one of the best running backs in the NFL that nobody talks about really or gives any credit to. And you look at the situation this year, right? You've got a quarterback who's going to be more mobile, and you don't know if this quarterback's going to be as confident to sling the rock down the field. So while he's more mobile, and typically more mobile quarterbacks, they don't check the ball down as much, I think that Jordan Love can still check the ball down to Aaron Jones a lot out of the backfield. So I don't think that Aaron Jones's target share from what he saw last season is necessarily going to go down. In fact, I think it could actually go up. I mean, I really do. So even though we have a mobile quarterback, they're less inclined to let Jordan Love just sling the ball over the field more so than Aaron Rodgers, right? So that means potentially increased checkdowns for Aaron Jones. And we all know that running backs that are running with an efficient quarterback, they're typically always a lot more efficient, right? Because teams have to account for Jordan Love potentially running the ball, right? They have to worry about the two-headed monster with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. Aaron Jones is actually going to have bigger lanes to run through this year than he did last year. And if you look how efficient he was last year, my gosh, he could run the ball for 5.5 yards per carry this year. I wouldn't be surprised. He ran it for 5.3 yards per carry last year. Now he has a mobile quarterback in his backfield, which always increases efficiency for running backs. So I really love Aaron Jones this season because I think the yards per carry efficiency is going to be really good. Now, the reason I have him as a risky player is because A.J. Dillon really starts to cut into his opportunity share a whole lot. But it's just kind of the way that backfields are set up now in the NFL. There's so many split backfields. You can't really let split backfields scare you away from every running back. Otherwise, you'd only be drafting wide receivers, right? And if you look at Aaron Jones, his entire career, he's had a pest running behind him and still produced awesome fantasy numbers. Even before the team had A.J. Dillon, they had Jamal Williams cutting into Aaron Jones's opportunity share significantly, and he was still putting up elite running back one numbers. Last year, he was more of a, a high-end running back two, maybe a low. He was a low-end running back one. But he wasn't a high-end running back one like we've seen him in past years. But I think that he has the potential to return to mid-round running back one form this season. And there's even some scenarios where I see him potentially being a high-end running back one again. And you can get this guy in like rounds 4 and 5. So based on the potential ceiling and the draft capital you're going to get, and the fact that you're inevitably going to get some of those super high ceiling games where he just comes out and absolutely goes off. I love Aaron Jones. For everyday redraft formats, it's very important to figure out which matchups to play him in so you avoid those dud games, because he is going to have some games where he just does absolutely nothing. We've seen it a lot throughout his career. He'll come out and have 5.5 fantasy points, and then he'll come out and have 37 fantasy points. So in everyday redraft leagues, it's very important to know which games to plug him into. And for best ball formats, you can go ahead and just draft him, and, he's going to be great for best ball because there's going to be a lot of weeks where Aaron Jones is your running back one on your best ball team. All right, guys, appreciate you tuning into the video. Catch you later.